What is happening, everybody? James Hancock here. Caught another flick at the New York Film Festival last night. I wanted to go ahead and throw down a review for Noah Baumbach's new film, The Meyerowitz Stories, New and Selected. This movie will be coming out on October 13th, but it was nice to go ahead and get a sneak peek at it at the New York Film Festival. Noah Baumbach, he grew up in Brooklyn, and his parents were both film critics, and he basically grew up at the New York Film Festival. His parents apparently just referred to it as the festival, and he was there in attendance with a couple of his key cast members to introduce the movie, and it was cool to see him talk about just how much the New York Film Festival means to him as a New Yorker. For people who don't know, this is a movie that stars Dustin Hoffman, Ben Stiller, and Adam Sandler, which is a pretty epic array of talent for a Noah Baumbach film, because most of his films tend to be character-driven, New York-based dramas of a slightly more modest scale. And the film's basically about a family trying to come to terms with the fact that their temperamental, eccentric patriarch, played by Dustin Hoffman, he's getting old, he's getting unwell, and his dysfunctional children are basically trying to figure out when, where, and how are they going to be able to step out from his shadow and live their own lives and have their own identities. I should say in advance that while I like Noah Baumbach's movies, I would not say I am totally obsessed. I haven't even seen all of his movies. I skip them periodically because too many of them seem to mine the same territory of eccentric, oddball characters and/or hipsters trying to figure out what life's all about in the city of New York, which is an inexhaustible topic, you could argue. Sometimes I have a little bit of a hard time getting excited to see yet another iteration of those themes. However, when I went to New York Film Festival 2 years ago, I saw this brilliant documentary, De Palma, which Noah Baumbach had co-directed, and it's a fascinating documentary about the career of Brian De Palma, one of my favorite filmmakers. So any director who's willing to make a love song to a filmmaker that I really admire, they're basically my friend for life, whether they know it or not. So while I might occasionally skip a movie like Mistress America or While We're Young, I will freely admit that Noah Baumbach is a very, very talented filmmaker who also, it should be mentioned, has an excellent head of hair and great fashion sense, two areas that I obviously need to work on. So for people my age, Noah Baumbach was a big thing in the 90s because while I was in college, he came out with this movie, Kicking and Screaming, and it was one of the indie films of that period where characters really seemed to act and talk like characters that we knew from our own lives. I'll never forget somebody telling me this was the pitch he made. He said, "Man, I just saw this movie called Kicking and Screaming, and yeah, they talk casually about jacking off." And at age 18 or 19, that seemed really, really impressive that a movie or a filmmaker would just talk about those matters in such a casual fashion. But overall, Kicking and Screaming was a pretty funny movie for its time, and I really enjoyed The Squid and the Whale as well, Noah Baumbach's film from 2005. For my own particular taste, I think Noah Baumbach actually delivers better work when he's getting outside of his own head a little bit, because he worked with Wes Anderson on the screenplay for The Fantastic Mr. Fox, and I think Fantastic Mr. Fox might actually be my favorite Wes Anderson movie, although maybe it's Royal Tenenbaums. Funny enough, Royal Tenenbaums and the Meyerowitz Stories have a lot of overlap. But another movie of Noah Baumbach's that I really enjoyed was Frances Ha, which was co-written with the star Greta Gerwig, but it feels like a showcase for Greta Gerwig's talents, and I think she is definitely launching her own career as a director. So I just like it when Baumbach gets out of his own head a little bit and works with people that perhaps challenge him to tackle some new material. That said, The Meyerowitz Stories is a very solid movie. I laughed like hell through about half of it. Features some incredible performances from all the lead actors. I mean, I mentioned Sandler, Hoffman, and Stiller, but it stars a newcomer named Grace Van Patten, who I think is going to absolutely knock people's socks off. I mean, she's got a few credits to her name already, but this one really seems like it's going to be her big breakout performance. She has a really moving scene with Adam Sandler where they're playing piano side by side. But without question, the true show-stopping moments in The Meyerowitz Stories are when we see some of her experimental erotic films that she's working on. She comes from a very creative family, and she aspires to be a filmmaker, and she's a freshman at Bard. But her videos and films basically feature her in all the parts, acting out certain stories about superheroes or fairy tales, and it's just every kind of kinky sex you could possibly imagine, and the crowd was just roaring with thunderous approval throughout those scenes. Adam Sandler, it's probably his best work in years. It's a little bit ridiculous for me to say it's his best work in years because I haven't even seen any of his work in years. When I was in college, we watched Billy Madison and Happy Gilmore and The Wedding Singer on repeat. We were the perfect age group and had enough chemicals running through our brain where we thought he was just the funniest guy alive. But then in the early 2000s, something happened where just all the humor just seemed to bleed out of him. And I'm looking at IMDb right now, trying to figure out what's actually the last movie starring Adam Sandler that I saw. And I'm thinking it's Funny People from 2009, the Judd Apatow film, which was a more dramatic turn for him. But when I think of Adam Sandler, I mostly think of his comedy vehicles, like the things he's doing for Netflix these days. And the last comedy vehicle of his that I saw was Little Nicky from 2000. I mean, I saw Punch Drunk Love, the Paul Thomas Anderson from 2002, but Little Nicky basically ended my affiliation with Adam Sandler comedies in perpetuity, except for when he does these dramatic turns in movies like Punch Drunk Love or Funny People or now the Meyerowitz Stories. As someone who has often had an adversarial relationship with their older brother, I really sympathize with his relationship with Ben Stiller. Granted, Ben Stiller is the younger brother in this particular movie, but he's the more successful financially, and Adam Sandler's very intimidated. And he also has some grievances over how he was treated when his mother and Dustin Hoffman's character got divorced, and basically he was pushed aside in favor of the Ben Stiller character. But rounding out their trio is Elizabeth Marvel, who's funny as hell as their sister Jean. She might be the most eccentric of all of them, and in spite of all the family dysfunction that is going on, she really seems to love it and adore it, and seems in a lot of ways, when the situation might seem the most grim, she's actually the emotional bedrock for the family. And Dustin Hoffman, what can we say about him? I mean, he is a true icon of American dramatic arts, starting with the late 60s with movies like The Graduate, Midnight Cowboy. This is an actor who in the 70s was part of the vanguard of the new Hollywood, doing movies like Straw Dogs with Sam Peckinpah. He's got a laundry list of classic movies to his name, so I always love it when I see legends from this period delivering solid work. If you were going to do a compare and contrast between Royal Tenenbaums and the Meyerowitz Stories, I would argue Gene Hackman's character is the far more rich and interesting. And perhaps it's unfair of me to make that comparison, but it's hard not to. Noah Baumbach and Wes Anderson are collaborators. Both stories take place in New York. Both stories feature dysfunctional, aging children who are having a hard time living their own lives because of the very, very long shadow that is cast by their really dynamic and interesting father. And there's plenty of eccentric humor. So while I think Royal Tenenbaums is a very different movie, I think it's inevitable that people are going to be making those comparisons between the two. So overall, I really enjoyed the movie. There were times where I kind of felt like I was losing my mind or going crazy. That could have just been me projecting onto the movie because, like all of us, we all have our family quirks and eccentricities, and sometimes when the family tension cuts a little close to the bone, people are going to react in different ways. But I was absolutely thrilled to discover Grace Van Patten. I think she's going to be an absolute firecracker of an actress in the years to come. And I think the movie's 100% worth watching just to see her in action. She's absolutely fantastic. But the rest of the cast, they do a great job as well. So big thumbs up to Noah Baumbach. I think he delivered some very solid work here. And if you enjoy character-driven, cringe-inducing comedies, then next Friday, you should definitely carve out some time in your schedule to check out the Meyerowitz Stories. So thank you so much for watching my review. I greatly appreciate it. If you want to talk more, you can find me on Twitter at Colbrax, or just leave a comment in the comments below. And I'll be back at you in the very near future with some more New York Film Festival coverage. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it.